Welcome to RealmIQ Sessions, featuring conversations on AI with AI founders, AI leaders, and experts from around the globe, covering the intersection of media, technology, Hollywood, and marketing. Please give us a follow or subscribe. This is our host, Curt Doty.
Welcome, everybody. Let's get into it. This is season 3, and I'm so excited to introduce today's guest, Tim El Sheikh, coming all the way from London. He's the host of the CEO Retort, as well as the world's first augmented intelligence studio at Nebuli. His background is as a biomedical scientist. He's an ex-pro athlete. Quite the background, sir. I'm so happy you're with us. How you doing today, Tim?
Good. I'm good. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, I've been following you for at least a year, if not 2, on LinkedIn, and I appreciate your candid, pithy commentary on not only AI, but politics and technology in general. And I think we're certainly a kindred spirit. And I appreciate your voice and how you approach things and how you're pushing certainly ethics and AI. I know that's a passion of yours. So let's just talk about your background, if you're a pro athlete, how'd you get into technology and AI, and then provide an ethic layer on top of that background? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I wish I could say that it was all part of a plan of some kind. It was purely all accidental. I'm just a very, very lucky person. I think the technology and sports kind of somehow collided. The planets just accidentally collided because I was one of those pretty, I suppose, annoying children, like very badly behaved. At the time, my father was one of the sort of early immigrants to the United Arab Emirates. So we lived in Abu Dhabi when it was still desert, pretty much. And so they didn't have that many schools. And I was pretty much literally kicked out of every single school when I was a little kid. So basically, my parents had no choice but to somehow take me to work. And my father was an engineer, and he worked like in his organization. He was a part of the government at the time. They had these huge data centers, those like very, very old data centers that you see in the Godzilla movies, like one of those. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my first exposure to tech, because he used to babysit me there. Like he literally would take me and put me inside one of these things. And for me, that was heaven. I just loved tech ever since. And I was about 5. And similarly, they had to find a way to figure out what was the cause of this energetic, negative energy that I had in terms of, bullying kids and so on. So they sent me to a martial arts school. And as it happens, Abu Dhabi has always been the best location for martial arts. So that kind of, so basically I trained at a very, very high level. They pushed me, to get into competitions, karate competitions. I competed the first time when I was about, I think 8 or 9 or something like that. So that was my passion for sports emerged from that point of view. And the two kind of started to grow together. And so, yeah, I learned how to code when I was about 10. I loved gaming. And I think it was really my teenage years that I started to kind of look more into more interesting things that I thought were fascinating. So, for example, I loved robots, as all teenagers do in the 80s and the 90s. And also I kind of I lost passion towards martial arts, even though I still train today, but I didn't like competing. For me, martial arts is more of a way of kind of discovering yourself rather than try to beat people up. But I discovered basketball. So that was kind of the true passion of sport that I had. So I am a basketball player, even though I'm not very tall. I'm barely six feet tall. So I'm a point guard. And again, these two journeys, went in parallel. And in the UK, I started doing my degree in biomedical science, which is where my biomedical science background started. And also I started training for my university team, and we trained at the championship level. I was part of the first team that managed to drag our university out of the gutter. We won local, regional championships. We dragged the university for the first time into the national championships. So that was really cool. And the local team, the Leicester Riders, basically discovered me and one other player. And that was the same time that I was doing biomedical science, through which I discovered AI. And that was all happening in the late 90s. So we could delve deeper into that if you want. But this is how basically the two worlds always been part of my life, my entire life, literally.
Fascinating. So let's talk about the 21st century here. What is your path that led you to opening your own AI agency and what is your mission? And let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, again, it's a journey, I guess. I mean, I became an entrepreneur in the world of tech in probably, I think, 2002. And it was the first company I created was an ad network. So that was pre-Google Ads. And it was the first ad network for science. So we were looking at how do we use, again, AI recommendation system, which is basically what you see in social media today, as a way of helping scientific journals digitize. Because at that point, people in science were still dependent on print media. They were still trying to, sell ridiculously expensive ad pages, inside journals and so on. And we thought, here's an opportunity. The internet was a new thing, kind of like the way AI is these days. And we just wanted to help scientific publishers digitize and take advantage of online marketing and so on. But this is where we started to play around with AI, building AI recommendation systems. And it was all fine. But I think the first time that I realized the ethical side of things was a problem was when the publishers were quite openly sharing each other's user data. So they were like, say publisher A would say to publisher B, hey, I would like to beef up my user base by like 500,000. Can you borrow some of your users? And in fact, it's a practice that is still happening today among social media companies. There was a research that I shared on my podcast where I think it was Facebook that they found where every user's data, individual user, is shared with around 2,300 companies. And that includes some of the bigger companies like Amazon, Netflix, etc. So it's a practice that's been going on for a long time. And that I wasn't comfortable with that. But then the final nail in the coffin, as it were, that we had investors where quite openly were saying to us, hey, why don't we sell user data to data brokers? And I thought, no, we can't do that. I mean, people literally entrusted us with their data, especially in biotech. It's really sensitive, right? You don't just give data away. But the thing that really shocked me, it's not about that they were not ethical as individuals, but they were just pretty blasé about it. It's like, hey, let's just sell Curt's data. Yeah, who cares, right?
Let's just jump in the pool, right?
Basically. And I wasn't very happy with that. And then the next stage, basically Google Ads emerged and basically steamrolled all of the ad networks, including mine. So it's one of those things, I guess. But that gave me the opportunity to start looking at other areas where, for example, how can I use AI to solve more, wider societal problems? And at that point, that was around 2010, 2012, where we started to see the emergence of misinformation online and deep fakes. Again, that was already a thing at the time. And I thought, okay, we actually know how to build recommendation systems. We know how to build language models, micro language models. Maybe we could use similar techniques to try and identify misinformation online. And we thought we'll start predominantly with science, because at that period, the prime minister at the time in the UK, David Cameron, was talking about that the biggest national security that we were facing in the UK wasn't terrorism, but a pandemic. And as somebody that studied biomedical science, we actually studied epidemiology. And we said that one of the biggest problems in pandemics is the anti-vaxxer movement and the spread of misinformation. So I thought, hey, maybe that could be a tool that we could build a tool where we could potentially help governments and indeed agencies, etc., to figure out what's actually being spread online, whether it's real or not, or fake, etc. And we actually pitched to Google, and we joined Google Campus, and we were part of the same cohort as DeepMind. I was very lucky that we had amazing cohort around me. And again, that was the period where, even though generally speaking, I always like to share this on LinkedIn, that we didn't really think about AGI. We didn't think about using AI to replace humans. Everybody there was trying to solve a problem, right? So, I mean, I described my problem, for example, DeepMind, obviously using AI to solve scientific problems. There were loads of other guys doing cybersecurity, etc. So everything was kind of mission driven. But we had a lot of debates in London for sure about the future direction of AI. And around 2014, I started to see this. Of course, we've seen that predominantly with social media companies, but I started to see this campaign, as it were, where people were trying to push AI to the web without any guardrails, human intervention. This idea that let's outsource some of that user recommendation content, etc., via AI. And I was like, you can't do that. If you do that, will be a problem. It will, there's no intelligence in AI. This is part of the problem, that people think there's intelligence. There is no intelligence. It doesn't care that you're a child because it doesn't know that you're a child. It doesn't care that the video or content is toxic because it doesn't know that it's toxic. But unfortunately, people didn't listen. Yeah. And that was kind of my second period where I started to realize, again, the sector as a whole doesn't seem to care. Right. And I felt, okay, something needs to change. And that was kind of that was sort of the journey that led me towards Nebuli. And again, I exited in 2022, kind of cut all my ties with investors because investors are part of the problem in the same way where investors, they just, hey, let's just build the algorithms.
They want to monetize it, right?
Yeah.
How do I get money back? And selling data, it's the number one play, right? So
exactly. Exactly. And it's a shame because, like, as I said, I sometimes can, people think that I attack investors, but I don't really attack them. I just don't like their attitudes. I know, I understand that they have to achieve, the ROIs, whatever. But I just don't think that you shouldn't not do that at the expense of people's safety. You should not do that at the expense of children's safety. Because if it's their children, then they would regret it. But I think the fact that it doesn't impact their own, I hope it wouldn't. It's a horrible thing that if, your child commits suicide, for example, right? We've seen a lot of these sort of examples on social media. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but because their children or their loved ones don't go through that, somehow it doesn't cross their mind. There's no empathy, right? So Nebuli basically it was the outcome of all of that, where myself, my co-founders, we thought, okay, we wanted to do two things. So firstly, we wanted to educate the market about what AI is and what it is not. And most of the time, as I'm sure you're aware, like a lot of people think AI does something that in reality can't actually do. They kind of think of the Hollywood version of AI. We're trying to kind of be, somewhat burst the bubble a little bit. Say, well, actually, this is Hollywood. This is what happens in the real world, right? And that's fine. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It's still phenomenal. It's still powerful. And then the second thing that we're looking at is how do we make it ethical? Meaning that we prioritize building AI models that are trained to effectively, quote unquote, understand empathy, ethics, safety, so that, for example, if it detects that, say, a user is being negative, then it should stop. It should not interact with that user anymore, as an example. So there's a lot of techniques that we can play around with. And of course, it means that it's more expensive. It takes longer to do, hence the VCs don't like it. So we thought, okay, we'll do it. I invested my money into it. My co-founders did the same. It's employee owned. And we pride ourselves for being one of the very few AI companies out there that have no VCs. We're completely independent. And that independence is an advantage, not just for us, but I think also for the users and our customers. So that's what Nebuli is all about. And that's how I got into the whole ethical debates.
Yeah, that's amazing. When you think about ethics, I think about regulation. And there's certainly been battles, discussions, some laws. There's a difference between what the EU is doing, what the UK is doing, what the US is not doing. And all that leads to, for me, a conclusion that I don't think we can leave it up to the governments to figure it out in the near term. And so I believe that it's going to be the people rising up and talking on even in the States here, a local legislature level to get state laws going, one. And then two, what I call alt tech companies like yours, who have the right theories and philosophy and mission that is ethically minded, having companies like yours rise up and compete directly with big tech. I think that's what's going to save us. So what are your feelings about the status of laws, governance, these countries, and how you fit into that?
No, absolutely. That's a great question. I think you're right. It is a little bit messy. There isn't any consensus globally in terms of what even ethics means. And I think the problem is that because everything's been politicized, which is a very big problem, people kind of look at ethics and DEI and they think, okay, it's all bad, it's box ticking exercise, etc. But for me, I always try to simplify. I think the problem that we've done, or rather, the problem that we had in the tech sector for a very long time, that we pretty much failed to communicate with the general public in a way that makes sense to them. We try to be way too technical, etc. Whereas I try to be non-technical as much as I can.
Yeah.
And for me, when it comes to ethics, it's simple. It's going back to the point I made earlier. It's like, how do we make sure that the technology is safe? That's it. And I don't think you need to be politically affiliated to any party or anything like that to say, hey, How do we make sure that the kids are safe? How do we make sure that AI doesn't give you results that could potentially destroy your company's reputation? That's all ethics. It's nothing extravagant. It's sort of common sense. And so hence, I think, in fact, the reason why I decided to start my own podcast is to do exactly that. I try to tell people that we don't need to wait for regulations to do the right thing, right? I mean, you don't need the rule that says that, I don't know, committing murder is bad. Just how about if you just don't do it, right? Yes, it's good to have regulations because regulations can...
Common sense.
Yeah, it's common sense. But regulations can be useful. And believe me, as an entrepreneur, I'm not a fan of regulations. I'm telling you, it's like they can be quite ridiculous in many cases, especially in Europe and in the UK. But the one thing that I do like about the European approach, and it's not me being biased because I'm in Europe, but Europe always prioritized that idea of safety, right? The public safety. What is it safe for the public? Is it ethical? Hence, they introduced GDPR. Again, it's not perfect, but at least they're doing something to make sure that people don't do what my investors did in the past, be brazen about, hey, let's just share people's data, right? I mean, it creates at least a map on which we can follow the path towards ensuring that things are safe. But of course, I guess the debate is about how do you enforce the rules? How do you enforce the regulations? I mean, that's where, the problem can get a little bit complicated. And for example, I'm not particularly a big fan of the EU's approach in suggesting that larger models should be regulated more than smaller models. Because from my point of view, as somebody that built AI models, you don't need large models to create havoc. Cambridge Analytica didn't use large language models or any large model to create their havoc. You can tiny amount of AI can destroy a lot of businesses in an instant. So things like that, the technical side of it, they need to be revised, I presume. But my general message is that doing the right thing, it doesn't require regulations, just follow the common sense. And from the business perspective, because all of our customers are business to business, we started to engage with governments to advise them and so on. Imagine if your company deploys an AI model and it does what happened. I think one of the delivery companies in the UK, I can't remember, was it DTP? I can't remember which one, where they deployed a chatbot. The chatbot started dissing the company, saying, "Oh, this company is horrible. The staff here are ridiculous." And I was like, this is the kind of issue you need to avoid. So brand protection is a key element here.
True, right? It may have been true, but
may have been true. Yeah. Absolutely. Because one of the things, the other thing I like to tell people, that AI is data in, data out, right? So if you've got any anomalies in your data, in the same way that people, obviously the Sam Altmans of this world, they try to tell you that, hey, AI can amplify all the good stuff by 100 million times. Yeah, it can also amplify the bad stuff. If your data is not on point, or you've got any sort of dark spots in your data, it will amplify that 100 million times. So as a business, it is dangerous.
There's more bad data than good data in terms of
exactly
hate and racism and all that. So
yeah. I mean,
going unchecked in social media, right?
Exactly.
That's the thing. It's like social media, no governance, and here we are. I don't know 15 years into it, and you see the damage, but yet those same leaders of social media are the same leaders in AI. And of course they don't want regulations, and damage will happen because these big tech leaders just don't care.
No, I mean, that's the sad reality. They don't care. And I guess the question is why? Is it purely ideological? I see all people going things about, they're just being evil or whatever. I don't like to get into these sort of things, but for me, I like to be practical about it. There's obviously a reason they don't want regulation, and they try to even, destroy current regulations. I get people on LinkedIn, which I'm sure you get as well, where they want to push for deregulation. They're saying that regulation stifles innovation, which to me, this is like one of the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, because nothing stifles innovation. Because if something stifles innovation, that means it's not innovation, is it? The whole point of innovation is that you overcome whatever challenges that you see, right?
It's creativity, which is human.
Absolutely.
And there's no borders there until you build a technology that creates certain factors that had to be considered like, well, maybe we should regulate this because we didn't think about this when we had that spark of inspiration, right? That point of innovation where we want to go down this path. You've been down these paths, right? And you eventually switch gears, right? But it didn't stop you from ideating and innovating and creating, right?
Like I like to say, what stops innovation is two things: lack of money, if you don't invest in it, and lack of imagination.
Right.
That's it.
Yes, right. Yeah, lack of imagination. Let's take a break.
Vizsla is a great AI tool. I use it every day. It is the faster, easier, and better way to record your screens and make content. Get a discount by entering Curt15. Go to vizsla.us or scan the QR code. Speechify is a really cool app. It is an AI voice generator. It does AI voice dubbing and AI voice cloning. Go to speechify.com or scan the QR code. Strikingly is the most loved website and e-commerce builder by entrepreneurs. It is easy to use, and they have launched 12 plus million websites and online stores and counting. Go to strikingly.com or scan the QR code.
So ethics applies to so many different verticals, certainly in the IP and copyright. Music is a category. Do you have any thoughts about ethics in music and AI?
Well, it's at the crux of the whole copyright debate, isn't it? I mean, I'm very upset with our government here in the UK that they seem to be considering reducing our copyright laws. And I always like to remind people that the UK, and again, I'm being biased, but we have the best creative industry in the world. I mean, if you look at some of the greatest games, movies, music, it all came from the UK. We never had copyright problems, right? So again, when people go on about that, copyright stifles innovation. Well, how did we build the greatest creative industry in the world with the current copyright laws? Obviously, it didn't stifle anything. But again, it's the, it feels like as if they're listening to the VC class. And I know, in fact, one of the key advisors of Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, is a VC, which to me, I think that's a very bad idea. You should not have a VC as an advisor. Again, no offense to VCs, but if you're looking at the technical side of things, you need to bring in actual entrepreneurs or innovators in the world of tech, where they will tell you that actually, forget about copyright. That's not the problem. The problem is the data. The problem is, how do you compensate artists and musicians, for example, if you are to use their work to train the data? I mean, in fact, I always again, I share this on LinkedIn a lot, but for instance, back in Google Campus, there was this sort of like an etiquette where if you train models, like I speak even for my company at the time. So because it was science, we would use proprietary or closed journals, for example, to train the model. And the idea was that we want to train it inside privately to see if it works and test it, etc. But we would never put it publicly unless we have some kind of agreement with the copyright owner. Again, it's the right thing to do. It's not about, us being scared. It's just say, hey, it's somebody. If I'm taking someone's book, I'm not just going to take someone's book and train my model with it and then go out with it and ignore the author. I mean, there was an etiquette. You just don't do that. So the fact that I'm seeing now suddenly some of the very same people that were at Google Campus now suddenly going on about, oh, it's available on the open web. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything. It's on the open web because the owner allows you to access it on the open web. That doesn't mean that you basically have the right to replicate it. And I think, there's a bit of misinformation going on in here, the way they try to misinform people. But I've been to quite a few events where I had singers literally, they're asking me, although I'm not a lawyer, but they're asking me, Tim, I would love to put my music out there, but I'm scared because I don't want these, they call them ghouls. I don't want these ghouls to take my music and train their AI models with my voice and my music. What do I do? And my response is hey, go get yourself a really good IP lawyer. I mean, I've got a couple, and actually both of them came to my podcast to explain all of these things. But yeah, I mean, it's just, that was part of the etiquette that we had over the years. So I get pretty annoyed when I see some of my counterparts basically decided to, let's just forget the etiquette and just, prioritize this AGI dream, which literally is complete utter nonsense. But hey, it gets the VC cash, right? So let's forget the ethics and copyright. Let's take people's work And let's try and convince governments that actually copyright is a problem, even though it's never been, like I just explained. So yeah, it's a pretty aggressive data grab campaign right now. And they try to misinform the public. And we've seen that with Doge as well, not to be political, but again, I just call out what I see. I mean, they are accessing data that no company should access. No company should access your social security data or your healthcare data. I mean, all of that's been protected for a reason. And now these companies are trying to break all of these norms, and in the name of making AGI.
Yeah, a lofty goal. Yeah, etiquette went out the window. Quaint idea. And there is misinformation, well, certainly in politics, but even in the tech community, where people are confused by a lot of the terminology that's thrown out. I mean, bantied about. And so that leaves a confused public, creates fear, and creates inaction when people should be using their voices and choices to rise up against what I call the tyranny of big tech to protect their data, right? Let alone be in support of what is really empowering technology that can do amazing things in science and medicine and, marketing, the low-hanging fruit. But at the end of the day, the misinformation and politicization and geopolitics of AI is just really creating this cloud of confusion. And you, like myself, I believe that conversations like we're having here right now hopefully can illuminate and educate to help people get over the hump. I don't think I'm speaking to big tech through my podcast. I'm speaking to people and the users and the AI bubble of AI adoption, those enthusiasts who have learned to really love the technology, but yet there's so many choices out there. I believe they can choose to use ethical platforms versus just automatically go to the big ones. And I think those are rising. I think there are more startups happening who have the same lens as you with through the eye of ethics, creating a platform that people can trust. Trust is a big factor in adoption. And I think a lot of the misinformation has built distrust.
Yeah. No, absolutely. In fact, I am doubling down on the statements that I've been making for years that I think the future success of AI post the hype will be trust. I don't think people will care about the size of your language model, how many parameters it has. No one cares about that. I mean, the one thing I started doing, and I know I encourage, probably yourself, but even, the listeners, to try and get out of the tech bubble. Because of course, London is a bubble in the UK, but then the tech, the Silicon Roundabout is the bubble within that bubble. So what I've been doing, which kind of one of the reasons why I started doing the podcast, is like, before I start any new venture, I always like to go out there and ask people questions and explore. But I've actually started doing this more regularly, where I go to event and I speak at events outside London. So I go to, smaller events, local events in various cities and towns, universities. Even I go speak at schools sometimes. And I'm telling you, man, they're not engaged. It's not the same. So we've got the enthusiasts in our bubble. You go out of the bubble, people don't really care. Or some of them who do, they, like you said, they are quite confused. They don't know what to believe. And I feel, the onus is on us, like you said, to actually try and educate people. So I don't tell people don't use ChatGPT. In fact, I was in an event recently where actually there were a couple of people that listened to the podcast, which I was, oh, that's cool. And they were saying, oh, Tim, so are you telling us that we should not use AI? And I said, no. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying you should use AI. In fact, I've been saying since 2019, I'm sure there's a tweet. I was in an event post launch of Nebuli, like it was January 2019, and it's like a couple of weeks after we launched. It was at a university, in fact. And I said at the time that there's a big AI wave coming, and you absolutely need to be ready for it, and you absolutely need to take advantage of it, because if you don't, the way things evolve in AI, they evolve fast. And before you realize it, your company will disappear. It will become irrelevant in the market. If your competitors deploy AI in the right way and you don't, you're out. You're
Right.
Forget it, right? And I still say that today. But what I also tell people that because of this hype, it's quite dangerous for your company to follow this misinformation that could literally destroy your company's reputation, as I explained earlier, right? However, ChatGPT is great for a non-technical person to try and understand what AI looks like. Because not that long ago, one of the things I used to do when I go to any event, I would ask the audience, when I say the term AI, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Almost 99% of the time, they would say Terminator. It was always the case. And I was always, sorry?
T2 dystopia.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But this is how they relate to AI. It's all about robots in Hollywood, right? So that was the point where I was explaining to them that actually robotics and AI are actually two very separate things. You don't need a physical being or vehicle to deliver AI. AI can be injected into anything and everything. And it's been, in fact, part of your life for the past 20 years. I know, because I was one of the people to bring it. I'm sorry, but that's what we did.
Right.
So I tell people that today, when I say AI, they think ChatGPT. And I actually think it's good that people have been exposed to ChatGPT, because now finally they know that AI is nothing to do with robots. You don't need a Terminator anymore. But this is where I get annoyed with the likes of Elon Musk and Sam Altman and my counterparts, that they now, I used to try to teach people that Hollywood, to take Hollywood out of their definition of AI. But now the tech bros, they're trying to bring Hollywood definition into AI, now that people understand what AI actually looks like. This is the problem. So hence they're a bit confused. Yeah. So I try to tell people, look, if you've been following me for a long time, you know that I've been saying exactly the same thing nonstop, pretty consistently. The same thing applies. Just ignore what the tech bros are telling you. They're trying to give you that Hollywood fantasy. But the reality is it's much more practical. It's really powerful. It's useful, but it's also dangerous if you use it irresponsibly. Start with ChatGPT. You can do it for free. Claude as well. Fantastic. You play around with it. You understand how it works, but do not share your data with them. Never share your data. But you can deploy it privately if you use Google Cloud or Azure or anything like that. They've got these models available on your private server. If you need our help, we can help you. Or if you've got IT departments, let them do it for you, etc. So, for me, I think it's that's why I try not to be negative about AI, because generally speaking, putting the tech bros aside, it's a phenomenal human evolution, I believe. The way we put it together, it's remarkable. It's state of the art beauty. I mean, I would say that.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, I'm an AI optimist, but I'm a realist when it comes to exposing, the good and bad side. Yes. And I think people need to know those things. Mm. You speak of, by the way, I have not seen a robot in the 2 years that I've been using these platforms. So I don't know why robots keep getting, brought into the conversation.
Actually, I don't know if you saw the post. It's a fairly controversial one. I said that humanoids are probably the most useless robots ever. They're nice toys, but the whole point of robotics is that you build a robot that can do things that humans can never do.
Right. And my point is, why should they look like a human?
Exactly.
Why is it always personified as a human? It could be another thing. And again, it takes people with imagination, right? Yeah. To think outside the box. That, and it's kind of happening in robotics, where a robotic dog could patrol a border with a machine gun on its back better than a human. And because it's lower profile and can roll and do all kinds of things, where a human personified robot is like, oh, there's the robot, I'm going to shoot it. Where, again, but that's a robot strategy, which, is really separated from AI, like you say.
Where's what I like to describe the Hollywoodification of AI again, isn't it? So this is, they tried to bring Hollywood back into it, but it's
Black Mirror. That was a Black Mirror, right? With the dog. But and I think Black Mirror, a lot of it's filmed in England, because a lot of English actors. Ironic, anyway.
Exactly.
I agree with you that England is the center of creativity. Hello, the Beatles, right? Mm-hmm. The Stones. Think about it just musically.
Exactly.
Not Hollywood. It's like amazing. The another aspect of AI is where we're going where will we be in 10 years if we can, get over the politics that are, exacerbating negative issues, but yet science does march on, even though it's being repressed in the United States. Where do you see us in 10 years?
If you asked me this question a year ago, I would have had a very different answer. A year ago, I would have said that actually, I think we would have had major scientific endeavors with AI. I would have said that we would have had more companies like DeepMind emerging, or we would have had more effort in investing in AI that can help us understand, science, healthcare, the environment. Because the way I see it, I talk a lot about this on LinkedIn and the podcast, that the way I see it from my experience, that AI is part of what I see as the 5 key pillars of society. And that's our identity, the environment, education, healthcare, and finance. And, AI has been part of this for years. And it can, these 5 things could improve beautifully and exponentially with AI. However, I never thought politics would become part of this equation. And the thing that worries me, that politics has impact on those 5 things as well. They use these 5 things, politicians everywhere, all over the world, they use these 5 key areas as a political football. And now that you've mixed AI into that, unfortunately, I'm more cynical. I'm not as positive. I'm really, really cynical about it. For me, I feel that the only solution for us to achieve any kind of positivity is for this hype to explode, which means it will cost us a lot of money. And interestingly, I believe Trump is going to facilitate it further. Now we've got these tariffs. I think it's going to happen. I think we're going to experience a major financial calamity, probably worse than what we've had in 2008. And I experienced that. It killed my company at the time. So it was Google and the financial crash. And I feel there needs to be a major reset of some sort, politically, economically, because it seems that, politicians have basically completely decided to jump in headfirst into the AI hype, not AI reality, with all the deregulation, etc. I think we're going to go through a really messy period within the next 5 years. And the only way we can get ourselves out of it is to have a financial catastrophe, because that's how we seem to, as a global society, that's how we seem to learn lessons, don't we? We have to wait for something bad to happen for us to then realize we should have probably done that differently, And I think this is why I feel that trust will be the key issue. Human-centric models will be the key issue. I think people would want humanity back. I think that would be the thing. So there'll be a major sort of probably societal self-reflection in terms of thinking, okay, we've tried this AI hype. We went through all of that. We've lost a ridiculous amount of money. Our economy is in disaster. Okay, what do we do now? Okay, maybe we need to kind of go back to the drawing board. Maybe we need to put people first again, right? So that's my prediction. I think. Sorry.
From your lips to God's ears.
Well, I even created a company that basically we're kind of betting on that. That's where I feel that we can play a big role. But of course, ideally, what I'm trying to do right now, of course, I don't want that to happen. The main reason I'm doing what I'm doing, and I tell people I would have been a hell of a lot richer than what I am right now. But I am doing what I'm doing because I want to prevent the catastrophe, right?
Yeah.
But I honestly can't see it.
If the catastrophe is inevitable, it could be the reset that's required to course correct.
Yeah. No, absolutely. What I can say pretty certain that we're not going to have AGI in 5 years.
All right. Prediction.
Because AGI is just, again, AGI is kind of like, again, as a concept, it's as useless as humanoids. It's like, why do you need AGI? I just don't understand it. As a scientific endeavor, kind of like with humanoids, yes, it's interesting, just as, to play with it and kind of tests, whatever. But if we're talking about real world applications, it adds no value. What do you need AGI for?
What do you need robots for?
Well, the humanoids, yeah.
Except to send to Mars. I believe in sending robots to Mars and not people. Actually, I don't even recommend going to Mars. We have enough problems down here on Earth.
Well,
figure
again,
out.
that's another nonsense for me as a scientist this time, not as a tech entrepreneur. But it's like when they're going about, we want to, terraforming Mars. I'm like, well, if we can do that, why not revive the Saharan desert, for example? How about that?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I'm sure to be a lot cheaper. There's still oxygen there.
And quite the haven, the lush tropical paradise between the Tigris and Euphrates back in the day, and
Exactly.
into a desert, which
Exactly.
is prophetic. Right? But how do you revert? And that's where I love conversations around the solarpunk and a utopian future, which realizes that, how do you use technology and green, energy, which has been politicized, to actually save the world, to make a better world. And let's imagine that. Let's put Hollywood's emphasis on that instead of dystopia. There's been more books written about dystopia than utopia. And that can be reversed, right? It's just a matter of get rid of the titillation of evil and destruction and put it towards reconstruction and goodness and humanity. And unless we do that as creatives and as people, we are facing a dystopian future. Collapse is imminent in whatever respect and to whatever degree, nation by nation, if not globally. But again, it's the people that need to rise and use their voices and choices to choose what to read, choose who to support, and what to develop, how to use that out of the box imagination to imagine a better world through the use of AI and whatever technology.
Yeah. But I think we need to get politics out of it somehow. I mean, I think this is really the key.
I agree. We're going through some things here in America that are
We've
just
been
really
through it. We had Brexit. This is it's the same people. I mean, I even talked about, again, on my, I don't want to plug my podcast too much, but it's just to highlight to people that, many of us have been saying this for a long time. Like I even compared, I think it was in probably August 2024, where I was talking about what if Project 2025 happens. This is literally what we had here with Brexit and Liz Truss, because it's the same people. So the same think tanks and whoever that funds these think tanks are exactly the same people behind Project 2025. And I did say that if that happens in the US, that's basically Brexit 2.0, but American style. So that means it's going to be bigger, harder, because they ransacked. What I find really annoying, and it really does make me angry sometimes, when I see the same people say, oh, look at the state of the UK. Look how the UK is so run down and stuff. And I'm like, you guys ransacked the UK. It was you. The UK was fine. Oh, not fine. No country is perfect, but pre-Brexit. That's another thing I try to remind people. Like London, we were the Silicon Valley of Europe, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, I was campaigning and pushing that I wanted London to be the Silicon Valley of the world, because we had the perfect geographic location. Everything was happening. But then Brexit came in and just destroyed all of that. And it was like, that's why I get really annoyed with the current government when they say, we want to make London a tech hub. I'm like, we were the tech hub. We were the tech hub. And it saddens me that I see the same thing is happening in America. It's the same people. So they've ransacked our country. Now they want to ransack your country. And it's the same people.
And I think there's an evil component there, though you don't like to talk about evil, but I think there's an evil there that really can't be.
Oh, greed. Maybe it's just greed.
Yeah, greed, but greed is evil. So
greed is evil, true. Yeah.
Anyway, well, I want to end on an up note, and I want you to promote your company and tell us how to find you, tell our viewers how to find you, and where are you speaking next, and how can they follow you?
No, I appreciate that. So, if the listeners enjoy that sort of conversation, I have that on my podcast called the CEO Retort. And the idea behind it is that I try to bring experts in their fields from all over the world to talk about the issues that I talked about. So for example, I mentioned the child safety issue. So I brought a child safety expert from Canada, Professor Sarah Grimes, for example. She's a world-renowned expert in that. So we had a conversation about that. Talked about copyright. I have this great guy, Ben Mailing, who was, he's the IP lawyer in London. He's the European leading IP lawyer with PhD in maths. So the guy knows AI and IP law. I was like, perfect. I need you to be on the podcast. I always try to bring these sort of conversations, no BS allowed, straight to the point. We don't pull any punches. So I do that. So you can check this out, ceoretort.com. And if you're interested in my company, it's Nebuli. That's nebuli.com to see what we're up to. I mean, we do a lot of R&D work. So we're not your sort of typical agency. We don't sort of design apps or whatever. We're a group of data scientists. And what we tend to do, we help companies with the data science, data modeling, maybe even sometimes building AI models specifically for enterprises. And we kind of work alongside their CIOs and IT departments because these are two very different things. IT and data science are separate. So that's what my company does. In terms of speaking, I'm literally everywhere. Like I said, I try to avoid the big events. I've done all the big events in London or whatever. I feel like now I need to speak to people outside the bubble. So I go to universities, smaller local business events, etc. So yeah, if people want me to come and sort of talk to your local businesses, yeah, get in touch. I'll be happy to help.
Awesome. All right. Well, listen, thanks, Tim, and thanks to all of you for tuning in and catch more of our RealmIQ sessions on your favorite podcast platforms. Please follow and smash that subscribe button. You can also follow us on TikTok, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky. Thanks a lot, Tim. Have a great day, and we'll catch up.
Yeah, thanks, Curt. Thank you, listeners.
I want to thank our sponsors, Vizsla, Strikingly, and Speechify. If you want to sponsor this podcast, click the link below.
RealmIQ. Transform your business with AI-driven innovation.
Subscribe to our Media Slam newsletter and learn more about the intersection of design, content, and technology.
CurtDoty.co. Branding, marketing, and product development.